Hi team. So this session, right? So we are going to see about the continuous feedback, and before that, so in yesterday's session, the one leftover is like the AKS demo. So that one we are going to see today as well, and after that we are going to see the something about the continuous feedback, and after that we are going to see how we can integrate. Azure DevOps with Microsoft Teams. So the continuous feedback means, right? It is just about the integrating maybe the feedbacks with the chatting medium, like the Teams is one of the collaboration tool, right? So maybe we can say like chatting tool also. Maybe sometimes, right? So some of the other peoples they would use Slack also, the Slack channel also. But in this scenario, so as they have just added Microsoft Teams, so we will just going to see how we can integrate Azure DevOps with the Teams. But before that, yeah, we will get to know about the we will see the AKS demo. Okay, so Mebrad, so yesterday we tried, right? So it is not working. Maybe before that I will come from scratch because uh, Amos is not joined yesterday, so that's why I will start from scratch. Maybe we will come from the resource, maybe source code repository. Okay. So for example, this is the project, right? So in this organization, so we have created one AKS demo. So this one we have cloned from the Azure DevOps demo project generated from this portal. We have generated the project. So first we will see what is the structure in the repository. Okay, so they have a .NET core project, sorry, .NET core or .NET project they are having. Under that maybe they are having some unit test or integration test, load test they are having it. And apart from that they are having the mhc aks.yaml file. Okay, so we have seen, right, for the kubectl, for the kubernetes, so we need to provide the yaml file for the deployment. So this is the deployment yaml file, and here we are specifying the replica as one. And then under that they are having the two containers. So this is the one container, and so this container, right, so the backend container, so it is the service type is like cluster IP. So we have seen that the cluster IP means this one it will be accessible within the cluster only. So for this container, right, it won't expose the endpoint outside of the internet. Okay, and then here the another one more, the deployment.yaml file, the front end application. So this is what we are going to access it, right? So that's why it is created using the load balancer type. So we have seen, right, the load balancer means we can access the container application from outside of the, so from outside of the cluster. Okay, so for example in this yaml file they are actually having the two uh, so for example they are having the two containers. So one is they are using the service type as load balancer to access outside, and from outside, and then other one is like the cluster IP, so that it can communicate within the maybe the back within the cluster itself. So maybe you can say like so why they are making the Redis cache as the cluster IP. Okay, so for example here, right, you may be asked like the cluster IP. So why they are asking the MHC, the backend? So this one, right, why they are making it as the cluster IP? Okay, because the Redis, right, so this is something the sample application, right? So the Redis is something like in memory data store, they will say. Maybe mostly, right, we will be using the Redis for the caching. Okay, so we can cache, we can add some key value pair, and maybe we can set up some expiration time also. And maybe wherever in your application it is needed, right, you can pull the caching from the Redis. Okay, so that the Redis is something like the in-memory caching. Okay, and then so this one, right, we don't need to expose outside. So this needs to be accessed only by the our front end application. Okay, so from other application we have one, right? So that one only needs to communicate, so that our other web application also, right, it is inside the cluster only, so that it can be able to access the Redis caching. Okay, and so here maybe you can ask the front end application. So the front end application we have to access outside from the we have to access it, right? So we are not inside the cluster, so that is why they are creating as the load balancer, so that it is exposing in the port 80, so that we are accessing from the outside of the cluster. So team, you are good with this one, right? Maybe here we are having the only the for example, right, this is the deployment. um, okay, so this is the one deployment.yaml file. They are just deploying the Redis image. The Redis image means it's a in-memory data store. So for example, they don't have any heavyweight the database kind of application something. So that is why maybe yeah, they are using Redis. But you know, right, so the Redis, they don't want to expose outside, there is no point, right? Even we can maybe expose outside also, but it's not maybe not record something, because when we have to limit only the resources needs to be exposed publicly. Okay, so for example, right, as much as possible you have to restrict your services within your private network, so then only your application would be secured. Okay, if you are exposing all the maybe the services or application in the outside of the so outside of the maybe cluster, right, so there are much maybe possibilities for the attackers, or maybe any other person can maybe they can try to hack, so it will give some possibilities for hacking our website. Okay, so that is the reason only the service you want to expose, so that only you have to expose outside of the cluster, or that one only you have to access from the public over the internet. So Mebrot and Amos, so you are clear, right? So why we want to host within the private network, and why we should not host maybe outside of the cluster, or maybe the why, maybe what are the risk when we are hosting over the public. So Amos and Mebrot, any
Yeah,
yeah.
I was on the mute and talking.
Yeah. So, and you are
Uh,
also understood, right, Amos, like why we are mentioning the cluster IP, um, and then here, and then the front end application, and so this one, so this is the front, our web application. Okay, so this is our web application. So we will be creating this image, and then we will be pushing it to Azure Container Registry for storing the repositories. And then here we are setting some limits, right? So I think it can request 250 m the CPU, and it can go till 500 m the CPU limit. And then here for MHC the front, this application we are using the load balancer, so that we can access the application from outside of the cluster. Okay, because right, even at least we should expose our web application endpoint, so then only we can access it from your from our local machine. Okay, so you're good with this the deployment.yaml file, right?
so
Yeah.
is it like only one container we are creating here, right?
So no, so we are going to create two container. So one is the this one, so like our web application, and another one is like here yeah, so another one is like here this the Redis image, the Redis one, the distributed caching, right? So this one,
Hmm.
so there are actually the two containers for our application, so in this sample application.
So this Redis, this database is the backend, right?
Yeah. So it will act as the backend for the sample application. They are just using it. So this is right. So for example, whenever so it won't have any persistent data. So for example, right, if you are having the SQL Server or Oracle database, even if you are restarting the maybe server, you will be having the you will be having the actual data, whatever the table, maybe the stored pieces, whatever it is inside the maybe the database, right? It will be having, okay. But the redis means like it is just like maybe key value pair, maybe it is they are not using, I don't know whether they are not used to those things. But the redis, right, like a key value pair, maybe you will be providing the key value pair, and then you will be setting the expiration time also. Okay, so for example, right, you are logging into the maybe ASP.NET Core application something. Okay, so upon the successful login, so they will be providing some session token or something, right? So that will be stored in your maybe the Redis cache or something. The user claims something, it will be stored, and then they will be setting up some expiration time also. The session will be valid for the maybe 1 day or 2 day. Okay, and after once you have created, right, so whenever the user is logged in, so at the time so the particular session will be get from the redis cache. Okay, but after the 1 day the limit is exceeded, right, automatically the redis cache will be automatically deleted. Okay, so then it will again ask us to create the maybe login again, or that is depends upon our application only. So mostly, right, so in which cases they will go for redis. Okay, so for example, the data, it should not be frequently updated, and then those data you need to access this very frequently. Okay, in those scenario, so instead of you are fetching the data from every time from the SQL database or the document database or the NoSQL, you are just storing it in the in-memory cache, and then whenever you need, you are just pulling it, so that you are not giving full load to the database all the time, and then you are maybe your application also, it will be performance would be better.
So the where the actual data will be then?
So it will be in the in-memory cache. So for example, right, it will be in the memory. So it's basically in the random access memory only. So it is in memory, right? So in memory means, right, so in RAM only all the key value pair it will be stored. So for example, in the database, right, the SQL server and all, it will
Mm.
be stored in the hard disk only. Like maybe
Right.
the MDB file or LDB file, it will be stored all the data. But for fetching and then inserting, right, it will take some time. But since the Redis is managing the data in the in memory, it will be faster. But here the limitation is like you cannot store as like the real time database. Okay, because here it will be having some threshold only, maybe whatever the field you are trying to access very frequently, and then those fields not updated regularly, so in those scenario you can use it. So for example, right, I will say one thing, maybe mm so for example, right, maybe the phone number or email id we can say, maybe it's not the good example, we can just consider. Okay, so for example, those and all not updated fields. Okay, so once you have signed in with the maybe some application, so after that you cannot change the maybe phone number and email id and all. Okay, so those details you cannot bring the details every time from the database. Instead, you can just store it in the maybe in memory cache, so whenever it's needed, so that can be accessed. And similar, like, so mostly, right, so they will be used in the session. But here the only the problem is, so once everyone is restarted, right, so at the time the all the in memory data also it will be lost, so that it will ask them to again re-login, so that it won't be any big problem, right? So if it is restarted, or the if the caching is maybe expired, so in those scenario, maybe if the user is re-logged in, so that it will be working fine. Okay, Amos.
Oh, okay, sir.
Yeah. So, I don't know maybe in this application how they have used, but this is about the Redis caching. So that will be the in-memory caching, and also, right. So here the one more thing is like the distributed caching. Okay, which means like you can have a multiple Redis instance, and you can store all the caching in equally in multiple node actually. So similar like the Kubernetes cluster, right? So the Kubernetes cluster means so it will manage the multiple nodes, and each node it will run the particular containers. Okay, and similar way, even in the Redis also, maybe we can create some cluster or something, and so that even we can add more data, so that yeah, so that is why they are saying like so the distributed caching platform or something. Okay, so here we are having the backend, so which is the cluster IP, so that it can be accessed within the Kubernetes cluster. And then another one, we are having the front end, so this is our web application. So here for this one, we are creating the load balancer service type, so that so we can be accessed outside also. Okay, and so the next one, we'll see the pipeline. Okay, so this one maybe the in the .NET project, right? So they are having the app settings.json. So they are just changing maybe the ACR name, and then the SQL server, the username and password and all, right? So they are just changing it maybe. Okay, so for example, in the app settings.json, under the source, I think it will be under the web, and app settings .json. Yeah, so here, right, they are just updating the maybe the SQL, the connection string, the SQL server, right? So they are updating the SQL server, and then the username, and then the password. So something they are updating from the particular task. Okay, so for example, the variables and all, we are configuring it here. The variable, right? So the ACR, SQL password, the SQL server name, and SQL user. So everything we are just configuring in the build pipelines. And so first task, right? So maybe it will look up the app setting.json file, and then if there is any pattern found like this, then it will replace the value. So whatever the variable value here, so it will update the value in the app settings.json file. Okay, and similar like in the maybe the aks.yaml file also. And so and after that, so here like so they are so here we have to provide like so this is some default task, right? So for example, in this project, they are using the Docker Compose for so creating and build image and all. So this is the temporary, the demo project, right? So maybe you can use the just a Docker command, like the Docker build, the Docker tag. So those command just for creating an image. But otherwise, right, so we can use the Docker Compose also. So in those scenario, in this application, they are just using the Docker Compose. So that is why, so for this task, right, so we have to provide the, so what is the container registry type? So whether it can be the Docker Hub or any other registry. And then we are just providing the connection details like subscription. And so this container registry we have already created in the cloud resource. Okay, so that is why we are just selecting here. And then this is the Docker Compose file. So there only they will be mentioning all the build. So basically, right, it is the same thing. So it has to so maybe look up the Docker file, and then this is the image name. So something like that only. And then the build.repository.name. So so the same thing, right? So build dot repository dot name. So it is basically, it will just get the repository name. So maybe in the repository, right? So here the repository name is like AKS. I think it will just refer the same name here. And so other things and all, the build images, so something. Okay, and then the build services. And so here also we have to choose the ACR, and then the Docker compose.yaml file. And then finally we are pushing it. So we are pushing it to the container registry. And then in those scenarios also, so we have to provide the Docker compose.yaml file. And then the log the service, I don't know maybe what is the purpose. Yeah, maybe in those scenario they could use the docker, the command line also, like in our local machine we have seen, right, the docker build, the docker tag command, but they have used the docker compose, so that also the alternative to that one. Okay, and finally they are just so staging it. So here, right, so in this scenario, so they have built the image and then they have pushed it to the docker container registry, sorry, Azure container registry. Okay, and so some of the files they have to stage it, maybe stage it in the staged repository also. So why? Because the .dac file, they are using it for the SQL DB creation. Okay, so this is something from the database, right, SQL Server database. When you're right clicking on the SQL DB or the SQL table, so it will be exporting the entire database or whatever the tables you are selected. It will be exported in the .dac file, and then you can be create the new database also with this script. So that's why we are staging the .dac file and then the AKS.yaml file also. Okay, and then we are publishing it to the artifact, the staging directory. So then we can refer the artifact from the staging directory, so that it will be available when we are running the build, right? So at the time we can select the particular build version and then we can run the deployment. So this is what they are having it in the build pipeline. So any queries, Amos and my bro?
No, sir.
Yeah,
I'm good.
yeah. So and then here, right, so we can go to the release pipeline, and so here yeah, so here, right, so from the build pipeline we will be getting some artifact, right? So that one we are referring here, and then inside the dev stages, right, so they are having the two jobs. So one is the DB deployment and another one is the AKS deployment, and under the DB deployment they are having one task. Okay, so in this scenario I think the .dac task, right, so what it is doing is like, so it will be getting the .dac the extension file, and then it will be pushed to the changes to the whatever the SQL Server database name we are creating in the Azure, right? So it will be added the changes in the database. Okay, so this is just like maybe so from the .dac file, so so it will be so whatever the table and the stored procedure functions, right, so it will be there in the .dac file, and then it will be pushed to the target database server. Okay, and then the next one is like AKS deployment, and so here, right, we will be providing the maybe the Kubernetes cluster name what we have created in the Kubernetes cluster, and then the namespace also we have to provide. So for example, how we can segregate the cluster widely means like the namespace. Okay, so under the cluster you can have a many namespace. So mostly, right, so many of the organizations, they will be having the only one Kubernetes cluster, and under that they will be having many namespace. So the namespace means like maybe you can naming it like dev namespace, SIT namespace, QA namespace, UAT namespace, so that even it is in the same cluster but it will be isolated, so there won't be any dependency, or the it won't be share the same resources basically. Okay, so we can still achieve the isolation. So that is why so in those scenario, right, so I'm not creating any new namespace, so I'm just creating the default namespace. So all our application will be deployed in the default namespace. So our application, the container and pod and all, right, it will be created here only. Okay, and so here we are just referring, we are just so mostly, right, so we will be doing the apply command, kubectl apply, and then we will be providing the YAML file, right? So the same thing only here also we will be doing it. Okay, but here the task, it will do all the execution part. So we just want to provide, so which command we have to provide, like so there are many commands, right? So in those scenario, we are just providing apply. So the apply only, it will be apply the changes to the aks.yaml file, so that inside that we know, right, like the services and then the parts, everything we are already mentioned. So that based, this is the so whatever the we defined in the aks.yaml file, and so that will be deployed accordingly in the aks cluster also. And then here update image in uh, AKS. So here what they are doing. So here also the cluster they are choosing it. So here they are using set command, and after that deployments and health dot, maybe 1 minute. So update image in AKS.
So this is all not reading from the YAML file.
So it will read
I
from the
thought
YAML
it
file
has.
only. So here you are. So I think this task is not referring the YAML, but the below one, right, the deployment. So it will refer the YAML file only. So that's what we are specifying the file path also. But this one,
Okay.
so this one, right? I think uh, update image in
On the
AKS. Yeah,
Yeah, okay. On the left side, they have created the task, right? Like execute Azure SQL.
yeah.
So how did they create those ones?
So here, right, you can just click on the add task, and then you can just search. Maybe I'm just want to use the
So
.NET Core. So in this scenario, if I'm adding the .NET Core, so it will be added here. So if you don't want the task,
okay,
you
so
can
by
just
def
remove the selected task.
okay, so by default they have like put in like two different buckets, right? Like the DB deployment and AKS
Yeah.
deployment. This is how it'll be
Yes.
like by default, or
No, so for example, that is depends on our maybe application only, right? So for example, the dev is right. The
Mhm.
dev, it could be like stages. Okay, under the stages there can be many jobs. So the jobs means like the DB deployment is one job, and then the AKS deployment is one job. Okay, under the job there can be many tasks like execute SQL DACPAC task is the one of the task under the DB deployment job. And similar way, under the AKS deployment job, we are having the multiple tasks. Maybe in the same thing, right? So for example, you want to update in the multiple database, you can add one more task also here, and then you can say this, you can search the same thing. Execute Azure SQL. Okay, so this one you can add it, so that maybe for this scenario, I think in the sample example they are having only one database. So maybe in your scenario, right, if you want to update in the two database, so you can have it like that. So that under the DB deployment, so these
okay,
are all the tasks we have. Okay, but it's not maybe necessary. Maybe this is something best practices, almost okay. But you can run maybe without the job also, like you can just say like the deployment, and under that, so the first sequence would be like exiting SQL statement, and the next one is like the deploying the Kubernetes thing. So maybe they're just
mhm.
for the best practices, they are creating the two jobs, and under that they are having the task. So if you want, so you can maybe just naming it like deployment, and under the deployment you can have all the three tasks in the same job. Okay, I think just for an understanding, they are keeping it like this, I guess.
Okay,
Okay,
got
and then so here we are clear, right? So I think maybe the kubectl apply command they are doing it. Okay, so that whatever the YAML file we specified, the containers and then the service and all will be created. But here the update image in AKS, I think I don't know maybe why they are doing it. 1 minute. Um, I think the build ID, okay, this is our image name. Docker image deployments. Okay. Yeah, I think to update the application. So for example, if you don't have a multiple front end parts, scale the okay cubes. Here they are just scaling it. Okay, and then to update the application, use kubectl set command, update ACR login so and specify the v2 application version. I think so. The first one, right? So if you are updating it, I think it's not updating, or I think when we are doing the kubectl apply itself, it will do the deployment. But additionally, they are having the kubectl set the image deployment slash mhc front equal to okay. So maybe Amos and Mebrat. So this one I will confirm tomorrow, but I don't know. Maybe so by just running the kubectl apply command, it will do the deployment. But here this one also may be one of the option. I think here they are not doing the kubectl apply command, tag and push the image. Maybe this may be alternative to the updating the application also. So for example, to update the application, maybe if the application is already there, so they can so just update the image name. So for example, so our application is already pushed to one, but if you just want to update the maybe this Azure word front, maybe this is the one of the pod or container something, right? So if you want to update the particular image version, so you have to do like that. So for example, this is what they are doing it here. So for example here, right? So this one is updated. Okay, the next one is like you want to, so for example, you have already running application in the Kubernetes. Okay, but in this scenario, so if you want to update the new version for the particular the container, so you can do like this. Okay, so that maybe if whatever the maybe the container, right, it is using the another image, so it will start using the newer image. So you got it right, Amos? So for example, even the kubectl apply, so whatever we are specifying there, right, so that will be taken for the application deployment. Okay, so for example, you have deployed successfully whatever you are specifying in the AKS that YAML file. Okay, the next one is like, so even after deploying it, if you want to change the version of the image, okay, at the time you can just specify the deployment the name, like what is the apply, and after that the image, the container name, and so there you can assign the image version. Maybe you can change it to some other version also, like maybe this version may be 53, 52, 54 something, so that the container, it will take the newer image. So here it is just example, they are just setting a new image for the particular deployment. Okay, so for example, before running this step, so we have to run the kubectl apply command. Okay, so the for the first time, right, if you are running this one, it will be it will throw some error. But the maybe the once the maybe the deployment is created, and the same deployment is there in the Kubernetes cluster. So from there onwards, so you can use this command to just to change the image version.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So now, so I will just and before that I will go to Azure. Mm. So basically, Amma, so in this scenario, right, I'm abroad. So here we have to create three resources. One is the AKS cluster, and another one is like Azure Container Registry, and then the SQL Server database. Okay, so these are all the resources we need to create for the demo. Okay, and so for the first one, right. So this is the command. So basically, we referred from the one portal. Okay, and here it is like. So the first one is like maybe we are getting the latest AKS version in the Azure. Okay, in Azure itself there will be many AKS the Kubernetes version, right? So in this one they are taking the latest version it seems, and then the next one is like we are just creating the resource group. Okay, for all the resources, right? We need to create for all the resource creation we need to have the resource group. So that's why we are by running this command we are creating the resource group. The resource group name is like AKS hands-on lab, and then the location where we are creating is East US. Okay, and then the resource is created, and then the next step is like we are creating the AKS cluster. Like we are providing the resource group name, and then the cluster name, and then the add-on something like monitoring, and the which version Kubernetes version we have to provide. So that one we are already getting from the dollar version, the version variable, right? So that one we are referring it, and then it needs to generate SSH. It is for maybe connecting with the Kubernetes cluster, but we are not going to connect with that. But if you want to connect with the Kubernetes cluster, at the time you will be using the public secret key value pair, so it will be stored inside the our storage. Okay, but we are not going to use this one. Okay, and then the location is like East US. So the same where the resource group is created, so here also we are creating it. Okay, and then the SSH key files, right? It is there in the ID RSA. Okay, and then here the Kubernetes cluster also created. Okay, and the next thing is like we need to create the ACR, the Azure Container Registry. Okay, and maybe here there are many the tier, like we are using the standard tier. Okay, and the name, so that's it. So here nothing different, like we are just providing the resource group name and registry name, and then the where we are how to host it, and then the tier of the Azure Container Registry, like basic, premium, standard, right? So in those scenario we are just using the standard one. Okay, and after that, so for example, right, the so the AKS needs to access the ACR. Okay, so then only during the installation AKS can pull the images from the container registry. Okay, so that's why we are attaching AKS with ACR. Okay, so for example there is some command is there, like attaching AKS with ACR. Okay, so here we have to provide the AKS name, and after that the resource group, and then the attach ACR. So here we need to provide the ACR name also what we have just created. Okay, so because there is some hyphen, so that's why it is provided error above. But in this one, right, after running this command it will be attach AKS with ACR. Okay, and so now the AKS and ACR setup is over. So the next one is like we have to create the SQL server SQL server first, and then we need to create the database. Okay, so for example the SQL server also the same thing, like resource group and the location and the SQL server name, and then what is the username and password to connect with the SQL server. Okay, and so once the SQL server is created, we are creating the new database in the SQL server. Okay, because in one SQL server we can create many database, right? So that maybe otherwise, right, you can go ahead with the Azure SQL database also, so that you don't need to maintain any SQL server or something. No, Yeah, so anyway, right, you have to create the SQL server first, and inside that you can create one or more the database. And so this is the SQL server name, and this is the database name, and this is something the service objective S0 something. I think maybe this one also maybe something related to the tire or something. So here they are saying S0, so that after this step the SQL DB also created. So maybe with the SQL server name and then the username and password, we can connect to the SQL database. Okay. Yeah. So that's it about the resource creation. Okay. So for example, so so this is the resource group, right? So inside that the container registry created, Kubernetes cluster created, and then the SQL server also. Okay. So first I'm going here. So this is the container registry, right? So this is the container registry endpoint. Okay. So maybe instead of the Docker Hub, we are using this endpoint. And here, right under the repositories, you can have the mini image repository. So whatever we are building from the Azure DevOps, it will be stored here. Okay. myhealth.web, right? So this is our repository name. Okay. So this is automatically created when we are pushing the maybe when we are building our image and then pushing the image, right, at the time it is created. And under that there are many versions would be there, like 59, 60 latest something. Okay. So whenever you are running the new build, so at the time it will create the new version under the same repository. Okay, so I think this is what we have to know in the Azure container registry part, like where the repository is created, and under that what are all the version it is present. Okay. And then what is the what is the value for the ACR. Okay. And then the next one is like the Kubernetes cluster. So this is the Kubernetes cluster, right? And here you can see like the namespace and workload. Okay. So I have said, right, the namespace means like within the same Kubernetes cluster, you can divide into many maybe section or the environment basically. Okay. So for example, so most of the companies, they will be having this they will be having a single cluster, but under the cluster they will be having the many names that is equivalent to the environments, like dev environment, QA environment, prod environment, something. Okay. So here also you can create a new environment, something like dev or prod or something. Okay. But I'm having just only one environment, right? So in those scenario, so by default it will be creating the default namespace. Okay. So the kube system public, the node and all, it is those are all the namespace it is needed for hosting the Kubernetes cluster. Okay. But the default maybe that we can use it, and otherwise if you want we can use the custom namespace also. Okay. So when I'm going inside the namespace, I think you can see the some definition, the YAML file definition or something we can see. I think similar like the kind deployment service, right? And the namespace also will have a YAML file. So here the here we need to provide some YAML file thing. But if you want to create a new namespace, right, so we have to follow this one. But otherwise, right, it is not required. So otherwise we can use the just simple the default namespace. So if you want to create a new namespace, like something like maybe the dev or QA or prod or something, so at the time, yeah, we have to follow this YAML structure and then we have to create it. Okay. And then we can again go and under the workloads, right? So you can see how many the parts and something and all, you can see like the number of parts. So these many parts are running, so many of those and all, it is needed for functioning the cube so the Kubernetes actually. Okay, so for example, under the kube system, and the kube system means uh, the namespace which is needed for running functioning the Kubernetes. And then here, right, we have the default namespace. So maybe I can filter the uh, namespace. Okay, I think here, right, I can just filter the default namespace, so that here you can see only the so only our yeah, only whatever the containers we have created, right? So that one only we can see it here. So one is the front end, and another one is the back end, and another one is the front end. Okay, I don't know maybe why it is again crash loop back off. Okay, maybe anyway we can check that one. But anyway, you can understood, right? Under the default namespace, we will be having the two maybe the containers we are just created. So it means like the two parts. Okay, Amos and Mebrot.
Yes, Selvan.
Yeah, and then so here you can see the services and ingresses also, like yeah. So maybe for example, right, all the maybe I will filter the default namespace here as well, and then here you can see these things and all in the cluster IP. Okay, so that it can communicate within the cluster using this IP. But anyway, right, so within the cluster also it needs to assign some IP, right? Then only it can communicate within the cluster. Okay, so that maybe we can say like this is the private IP, and then this is the public IP. Okay, so maybe the front end is we are using the load balancer type, so that it is having the external IP. Okay, so I think with that it should work.
So yesterday you fell, right? What happened with the front end?
Yeah, the yesterday, so the issue is like under the workloads, so even our application is something like uh, showing the this error, right? The yesterday it was this showing the same error, but I think but when I'm running in the morning, so I could be able to access the thing, but it again it is the same problem. uh, yeah, but yesterday also we faced the same problem, right? So because the when we are accessing the front end application, we are not able to access it. So that is the problem yesterday. Okay, so
Right, right. So my question is it resolved? If so, what was the resolution?
so the resolution is right on minute. Okay, so the resolution is like the last time, right? So we didn't update the pipeline variable. Okay, so we have updated the details in the so for example, where we have the Azure DevOps. Okay, okay, so the last time, right, we have updated the details in the release pipeline variables. Okay, but we forgot to update in the pipeline variables. So here the pipeline also, right, we will be having the variable section. So yesterday we didn't update the value here. So that is the problem yesterday. But I think after updating this one, it is working. But again, I think now also it should work. But I don't know. But anyway, so we will run once again and then we'll see. I think mostly it should work because I have accessed the application also from the Chrome. Okay. So for example, Amos,
So
you understood. Yeah.
yeah, on the task, like what are the variables you are passing? So that's what you are defining it here, right?
Yeah, correct. So for example, right, in the app settings.json, okay, and then the mhc aks.yaml. So in this file,
Mhm.
they won't be specified the Azure container, the registry name. Okay, so that one we have to change it here, right? So for example, I'm going to repos, and inside the mhc aks.yaml file. Yeah, so here, right, they didn't specify the full image path, like the ACR, the registry name, right? They didn't provide it. So that one we have to update it. So that is the reason we have to provide the ACR values in the pipeline variables. And then this task, right, the replace tokens in MHC, this task, it will update the value. The actual, the container registry value, it will update. Okay, so that was hyphen hyphen ACR, right? But that one it will be replaced by this text actually, ACR December 7 and Azure ECR.io. So that is the reason we are using the we have to specify the variables here.
So during the runtime, that's what it is overriding.
Yeah. So maybe if you want, right, maybe in some cases, right, maybe for the dev you are using the this particular ACR, okay, but in the production, right, you are using the uh, another Azure Container Registry at the time, right? So maybe if you are having it in the variables, you can just update it so that we
Okay.
can easily do it, right? So that is the reason.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so this is the thing I have updated, my brother. Okay, so I will
Sure.
yeah, I will run this one again. I think mostly it should work. We didn't update anything right after that. I will just redeploy. So okay, team. So I think it will take around 5 minutes. Maybe you initially, right. So the container is healthy, maybe, and after some period of time, right. So it is going into the continuous restarting mode. Okay, but when I'm just trying it to the login, maybe accessing the application. So this is the application. So okay, so this is the load balancer endpoint. So when I'm first connecting to the particular application, it starts working. Maybe I don't know, maybe when we are accessing the particular endpoint, right, maybe whatever the resource is loading, and if there is any problem inside the container, it's definitely so it will try to rectify it. So maybe at the time it will goes to the continuous, maybe the restart maybe. But yeah, but for initially, right, so when I'm just using that URL, it is working. So this is the application, but that is why I'm just trying to restart the Kubernetes cluster so we can see it. Okay, but yeah, maybe when I'm first initially seeing, maybe the resource is container resource is healthy, but after some period of time it is going into the some crashing or continuous restarting. Maybe that could be related to the problem with the source code or something. Maybe we don't know how they are written and all, right. Maybe there may be some compatibility issues with the latest AKS cluster or something. There is some chance, but I'm not sure. But I think from the so from our build and deployment perspective, right, and where it is deployed, so those things, yeah, we have seen, right. So that is fine, right. Or maybe otherwise, right, we don't know maybe what is the problem. Maybe for after 2 to 3 minutes it is crashing, so maybe that is something problem with their source code. Okay, but when I'm just initially starting that application, so we are able to access it. So this is the web application they are using it. But when I'm just restarting it, right, refreshing it, right, so I think this page also it will go away. But anyway, so we will try till the Kubernetes service is starting, and then after that I will show you from how I have launched this URL. So from this yeah, the services and ingresses tab. So okay,
So when it
Amos.
is failing, you don't see anywhere any logs or anything.
No, so here, right, so here you can see, right, the crash loop back of something. So this is something it will continuously but currently it is I think under the workloads we can see. So here, right, so this is some warning symbol, and I think
I saw like a folder on the left side, right? Like somewhere on the top, like a logs.
Yeah, I think here we have the logs.
Yeah.
Yeah, so 1 minute. So now it is restarted, right? We'll see.
Okay.
I think currently the metric server, and then maybe I will go to the node configuration. So this one also we are having the 3 nodes, right? So that one also, that's a good configuration only for this load. And maybe I think, I don't know whether they have configured the HTTPS and all. So that's why I'm just enabling the HTTP application routing also. So for example here, right? So we don't have a HTTPS configuration for this application. Okay, so that maybe I'm just enabling at the server level. So we'll see, maybe this maybe fixes the issue or not. So you understood, right? So they enable HTTP application routing.
Okay.
Here actually the metric server also failed. Maybe I will do one more time the deployment. So I will rerun the deployment once.
Okay.
And also while it is deploying, so we'll see other stuff also, almost like the alerting and then the monitoring stuff, right? So we will see this one. So here, right, Amazon Abroad. So here, right, so we have the insights, alerts, metrics, and diagnostic settings. Okay, so mostly like maybe here we have the activity log, right? Maybe whoever adding any changes, like maybe updating the cluster or deleting the node pool or changing any kind of configuration, right? So everything will be captured in under the activity log. Okay, and then the diagnostic settings, right? All the platform level so all the platform level the logins, like so because even the Kubernetes also having the many kind of the components, like API server, audit, controller manager, scheduler, autoscaler, so many things, right? So you can select whatever the diagnostic settings you want to configure. So or you want to store it in somewhere. Okay, so for example I'm clicking on it, add diagnostic settings, and then maybe here you can select whatever the log settings you need. Okay, maybe otherwise all metrics also. And then some Okay, and then here, right, the destination where you are going to push it. Okay, either it could be the log analytics workspace or the storage account, so which means like or the in the blob or something, or maybe you can stream as the message to the event hub also. Okay, from there maybe you can integrate with any other application. Okay, but I think the popular one is like the log analytics. Maybe you will be having many capabilities like maybe the drawing the board or something, many thing you can have it. And then the storage account also maybe so you can store it as the maybe the text file, but similar like, right, maybe the log for net. So in the almost did you use the library the log for net or something for the logging in your .NET
No,
application? Yeah.
no, mostly it'll be on a text file or like directly writing into the some of
Okay.
the tables on the database.
Oh, okay. But yeah, that the log format also, right? Maybe we will be just specifying the log level. It could be like info, warning, or the error level, right? We will be just specifying it. But anyway, so it will be, as you said, it will be stored in the text file or CSV somewhere. Okay. So the similar way. So those logs, maybe here we are be just sending in the log analytics workspace, or otherwise those CSV files or text files, right? It will be saved in the blob file, maybe the blob, right? So under the storage account
Hmm.
it will be stored as the files. Okay, and then here you can set it up some kind of the retention periods like 90 days or 10 days something, so that after that it will be automatically the log data will be purged. Okay, so this is maybe if you want to if there is any issues or if you want to do any kind of the troubleshooting, right? So in those scenario, yeah, you can use any one of the maybe the log analytics or the blob or something. Okay, so this is how they are doing the logs here, the diagnostic settings, and then the activity logs. And then maybe from the continuous feedback perspective, right? uh, So I will go to the deployment once.
So this is the Kubernetes container, right?
The Kubernetes service, AKS.
Service. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So because,
So
right,
within that service, you have these options. Okay.
yeah. So
Yeah.
because, right, the Kubernetes, it will just have the orchestration capability only. Okay. And on top of it, Microsoft, it is providing all the capabilities like IAM, like Active Directory integration. And then maybe you can easily maybe do the security related stuff. And then the storage, I think all the things, right, on top of it, Microsoft is providing it, so that for the customer point of view, it is very easy to use. So that's why we are going the AKS as the platform as a service, the Kubernetes as the platform as a service, so that you don't need to manage any kind of the node or maybe the installation or anything, right? So you don't need to worry about anything from your side. You just need to provide the deployment.yaml file. There you need to specify the image version and all the service kind of information, and maybe the AKS cluster needs to have the access to the container registry. Okay, if that is fine, then you don't need to worry about any other stuff, right? The networking or maybe the infrastructure configuration or the because, right, so here also you are adding the three virtual machine like the node pools, right? So here you can see there are three pools are there. So if you want to manage it by yourself, you have to do all the networking part and the hard metal the installation, right? Everything you have to make it. But now, right, so all the things, everything managed by the Azure itself, so that our task is very simple, right? Only the deployment, only our task.
Okay.
Okay, and then I will go to yeah, I think workloads. Yeah, I think now it is in the yeah, the running mode, right? It is currently available. I think for sometimes it is maybe here I am added the HTTP enabled, right? So because we have changed the configuration to accept the HTTP routing also, so that's why it is enabled those two. And here now the both the container is running fine. So we'll see the services and ingresses now. And so I think this is the HTTP. This is for the HTTP, and then maybe the front end. So I will use this public IP. Yeah, so here you can see the application, right? But I don't know, maybe this time also it will crash after some time, but maybe we'll see this IP also. Okay, default backend 404. Okay, so here you can see almost like the front end application, right? It is receiving the traffic from this public IP, and then this is the private IP. I think within the cluster, so they will use this maybe the other container communication, right? At the time, it will use this IP for the communication, but to access outside from the cluster, we have to use this. Okay, but for the other, right, the backend, we don't have IP. So because we have provided the cluster IP type. Okay, so far it is working. Maybe when we are yeah, currently now also it's working, but I think maybe I don't know, maybe after sometimes it will again goes down or not. But anyway, Amos and Mebrat, so you understood the concept, right? From the deployment perspective. So even if there is any crashing, right? So maybe there could be some related, the issue could be like the CPU usage spike, or maybe the coding issue also in between. So for example, so whenever the particular for example, for to load the particular page, right? So in the server it will run some kind of the C# code or any code, right? If there is any maybe the runtime error, so at the time there is some possibilities for the restarting. But yeah, at the time maybe the developer, they only have to fix that in the source code or something. Okay, so Amos and Mebrat, so you're clear with this one, right?
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah,
Maybe I have to create all these services and then play around.
yeah. Yeah, maybe, yeah, I think
Once we
yeah, I think
start
most
doing like a demo.
yeah. Yeah, I think so. For this one, so there is some Azure DevOps demo project generator, right? So maybe you can just
Mm.
use this one. So and then you have to see other the application configuration also, how they are changing it, so that yeah, you will be able to understand. But I have said, right, and the ACR, the name also they are changing during the build only. So in those
Mm.
scenario only, maybe you are not aware initially, but after sometimes, right? So you will be able to understand uh,
Okay.
Amos. Okay, and then I don't know, maybe for enabling the HTTP fixing that issue, or maybe so we will try to hit multiple times. Yeah, I think it is again. It's
So,
working.
Salman, one question. How long it will stay the portal, the access that we get?
So come again, my brothers. Sorry, I couldn't.
The portal, the
Yeah,
Azure portal that we get access, for how long it will stay? Because I would like to,
yeah.
play
Okay,
around.
okay. Yeah. So
Mm.
so I think for me,
So I don't know.
yeah, so for me,
Mm.
right, so on tomorrow it is expiring it. So it is basically like 1 month plus $100 credits it will have. Okay. So for example, here, so 1 minute, portal. So it is basically when you have signed up using the Azure Pass token, Mebrat. So from there onwards, it will have the 1 month period.
Okay.
So
It
for
will happen.
example, so you can just type search cost management plus billing, and they will ask us to billing account cost management. I think earlier they have given some URL. Cost management invoices. I think, Mebrat, so you have sign up using the particular thing, maybe the in the middle of the course only, right? I think you didn't start at the.
Yes, I think it's
Yeah.
around 20 days. Yeah.
Yeah, I think then you will be having 1 month around. So from there onwards, you will be having the 30 days, and then the free credits would be limited to $100 only. My brother. Okay, I think I have seen some URL, and there only I have checked. But anyway, right? I think here we can check on.
So it's the same with the Azure DevOps also?
No, no, no. Azure DevOps is something
Same
different.
as with Azure Code?
Yeah. So from that
Okay.
Azure DevOps, right, you will be having around 30 hours the compute resource for every month. So I think for the 12 months you can continue use the Azure DevOps, no problem. But Azure only there is some limitation.
Okay, I think we can create an Azure portal every month, using different email.
Yeah. That also fine. Yeah, maybe for your
Yeah.
company account, right?
Right.
Maybe if you are try to use the company account, even they won't ask you for the credit card also. So otherwise, maybe you have to provide your credit card, and then maybe they will initially charge us some small amount just for a verification, and after that they will send you the amount back. So yeah, so you can use the different
Okay.
Microsoft account. Sorry, my brother. Even the account is expired. Okay.
Right. Maybe one drawback is like if it has, do you think it will have any issue with the connection with Azure DevOps?
No, it's
I mean,
not.
the one that we are
Yeah.
using like this person. No.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So for example, my brand, so you can, what you can do, right? Whenever
Mm.
you are creating the resource, you can automatically delete it. Okay. And maybe you can have the infrastructure like the Terraform and ARM templates, right? You can have it in the your
Mm.
source code, and whenever you need, you can just change the subscription so that you can immediately you can create the infrastructure also. So you don't want to create the resources manually, right? Even if you're changing the
Mm.
different subscription, so you can have all the infra scripts in your Azure DevOps, and you can just change the subscription in the build and release pipeline.
Okay. Got
Okay,
it. Thank you.
I think we'll see now whether still it is yeah, I think now, right? I think after some time it is going in it is going uh, I think it is crashing mode. Yeah, that is fine. But anyway, we learned, right? So maybe there could be some problem, but maybe for the debugging, it will take some time. Maybe if I have sometime, maybe I will just check that one. But apart from that, right? Maybe this is good. Maybe how we are deploying, we are building the image and we are deploying through Azure DevOps. I think that is fine with that. Okay. And apart from that, here, right? The alert something. Okay. So this is where the continuous feedback or something. Okay. So for example, like how the project planning and then the sprint retrospective something and all, sorry, maybe for initially, right? We have seen how the planning is happened and how we want to manage the source control and how to build and how to deploy. Maybe the deployment platform can be any environment like app service, AKS cluster or Tomcat or IAS, anything. Okay. But once it is deployed, right? So we have to monitor. So in this scenario only, so we will be using the like the diagnostic settings and then the logs and all. We will be sending the metrics to the log management portal or the something like the storage account or the log analytics workspace. So there we are sending the logs and then the application insights and all the telemetry data and all. Okay. But based on the monitoring data, if you want to take any kind of action at the time, you have to use the alerts. Okay. So for example, you have deployed the application and you know where the application is stored, and if any certain criteria is met at the time, if you want to alert something to the developer or the team lead or someone, right? You have to set it up the alerts. And even, right, even if any maybe any the such scenario is occur, then you can trigger any other workflow also. Okay, so that is what we are going to see now in the alerts. Okay. So for example, for this cluster, right, so currently we don't have any alerts, so we are just going to create a new alert rule now. Okay. So here it is like scope is currently it is set like the AKS cluster. Okay. Maybe I think here the scope can be like maybe the subscription and resource group, so that whatever the resource that are available under the maybe the uh, resource group, so it will be applied to all the resources. Okay. So since I am starting from the resource level, so that currently the resource is like the AKS cluster. Okay. And then here we have to configure the alert, the condition. Okay, when the this alert should trigger. Okay. So for example, I'm clicking on add condition. So here you can see many the condition like the mostly used one, right? The CPU usage or the disk usage and then memory something. Okay. But as like others, so we will be just taking the maybe here you can say like the cluster health also, whether it is the running, so something, right? So for example, even the last application also, after deploying sometimes it is going into the maybe the crashing mode. So in those scenario, so it has to maybe the send the maybe notification to someone, right? So in those scenario we can choose appropriate signal. So for example, I am choosing maybe the signal like the CPU usage percentage. Okay, I am clicking on the CPU usage percentage, and so here So this is the aggregate for the last 6 hours. So this is the usage, uh, like the 4%. I think maximum it is utilized only the 8%. So I think after that it's not using anything. And yeah, I think here also it's saying right 6.59% in the aggregate level. Okay. And then here maybe you can say you can select at the maybe right. So right, under the cluster there are many nodes and then the node pool. Okay. So for example here you can select at the node pool level, or you can set at the node level also. Okay. So I'm setting like node pool and then equal to, and then here I can select the node pool name also. So maybe if I want to yeah, so here we can select like, so in this node pool, if the maybe the CPU usage is above 70 percentage, at the time I want to run this trigger. So that maybe you can say like it's a requirement. Okay. And then here the greater than, so for example the threshold is static, it's not the dynamically changed. So for example the operator is something like greater than the average is greater than 70 percentage. Okay. At the time only I need to run the particular maybe the trigger. Okay. And then here how it needs to be evaluated. Okay. The aggregation granularity period is like the last 5 minutes. The last 5 minutes, if it is above 70 percentage threshold, then it has to trigger it. Okay. So this is for example, right? So when during your application startup, so definitely there is a chance that your CPU spike can be go the 70 percentage, 80 percentage. Okay. After the next 1 or 2 minutes, it will again come back to the normal state. So that after that, then onwards, the CPU usage could be like the 30 percentage, 20 percentage only. Okay. So that we should not take at the instance level. So that is why we are taking at the 5 minutes the granularity period. So the if more than 5 minutes, if that the CPU usage is greater than 70 percentage, then it has to trigger it. Okay. So this is the granularity period, and then this is the evaluation. So for every 1 minute it will run the aggregation. So for example now, right, so 9:11 in my time. Okay. So that 9:06 to the 9:11 it will just search, and then if it is the 70 percentage above it exceeds, then it will run the trigger. So now you clear with this, right, Amos and Mebrod? So how they are setting up the signal logic? Like here you are selecting the node pool, and after that the alert logic. Like maybe here you can say like greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. So those things also you can set up. So here I'm saying greater. The average is greater than 70 percentage. At the time it should trigger, and here the evaluation based on the here the aggregation also you can change it, like more than 1 hour if it is the average is above 70 percentage something. Okay. But I'm just saying the 5 minutes, so that would be the somewhat reasonable for this one. So for this the CPU usage metric. Okay. So Mebrad, are you fine with this one?
No, actually.
Okay.
So what is exactly like we are setting up alert of what?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay, my friend. So for example, right? So you have deployed your application. Okay. So in your scenario, you have under your cluster, you are having only one node. Okay. But because at the time, right, there are many users coming into your application, and so your CPU usage is going beyond 80 percentage. Okay.
Okay.
So because the more number of users, but even if the same thing continues, even the more number of users is coming again, then definitely at some point of time it will go beyond 90 percentage, and more than 95 percentage also. Okay. At the time definitely your anyway, so if it is the 90 percentage or utilization means, the definitely your application it will be slow down, and then there are many chances for application restarting. Okay, because there is no resource, right? So that there is a chances
Right.
of restarting. So then it is introducing some downtime and then slowness to your application. Okay. So
Right.
that you want to know at what time you are getting the maybe more CPU usage, and if it is a CPU usage is higher, then it has to notify to the support team, and then the support team they might add the new resource, or then they will scale up the cluster configuration so that it will solve the issue.
Right.
So now you understood, right, why we need the alerts.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So can we go down?
Yeah.
That okay.
So here I'm saying like the CPU resource. So here I'm selected the uh, uh, like the CPU usage percentage. Okay, this is the signal. Okay, the selected signal. Okay, I am saying here like it is greater than
70%.
the
Okay,
average is
got it.
greater than 70 minutes for the 5 minutes of
Yeah,
time.
got
Okay,
it. Yeah.
this evaluation it will be taken for every minute, like 9:15,
Okay.
9:16. But for the last 5 minutes, it will check the average CPU utilization, and if it is exceeds 70%, and then it will run the alert. Okay.
What else can we do? I mean, is there any list of alerts here
Yes.
beside CPU?
Yeah. So for example, right, I will edit the signal. Here you can see like these many options. Maybe the
Cluster
cluster health.
health. Okay.
Maybe if the cluster is healthy or unhealthy. So for example, I'm choosing the cluster health. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think here, right, the cluster health, they are saying it in the average. Okay. But here they don't have any data, but which means like it is healthier. Okay. But maybe the average also you can specify like the 0% or something, like maybe the threshold value we can set it up so 50% or something. Okay. And then the unit count they are saying something, but I don't know the terminology, but they are just to understand the cluster health. Maybe the Kubernetes cluster determines whether or not cluster autoscaler will take action on the cluster. Maybe with this one, right, so maybe the autoscaler it will determine whether it has more node or not. So those things and all, this signal it will help us to detect it. Okay. And then the similar, like maybe the other easy understood one, managed cluster available. So the CPU core, CPU usage and the disk usage. Okay. So the disk usage means, right, am I brought? Like this is the hard disk. So for example, if you are doing some the file processing and all, right, you are receiving the maybe 500 MB file, and then you are processing it, extracting. So everything it will be happening in the hard disk, right? So that that disk usage percentage also we have to see. So in terms of performance, because the disk means, right, like IO, so the number of input and output per second. So for example, if it is for the particular second, if you are able to read only the two reads and then able to write five write, so those kind of metrics also we can determine here. So the similar like the
Yeah, yeah.
CPU we can do for the hard disk, and then memory also. The memory means like RAM, the RAM percentage. Okay. So for example, right, so that is based on your application, you will be you can be choosing method. So for example, right, if you are doing any kind of the file processing, then you need to be see about the disk usage also. But maybe if you are doing any kind of the bulk logic or in memory you are doing something, you have to set the alerts for the memory. And then the networking also, maybe in between the network in and out, so those things also they are doing something. But in those scenario, right, I think maybe we have to know all the each and every signal, the definition, import. Okay. But the popular one, right, the CPU usage, it will be configured for any other platform, like the Tomcat app service or any other thing, right? So the CPU usage they will be configuring it. But apart
Right.
from that, so maybe the node and the pods and all, right, this is specific to the Kubernetes cluster.
Mhm.
Okay. So for example, the CPU usage percentage, and for example, so what else we are missing? The dimension, the name. So the name of the pool. So I think it is just loading it. So 5 minutes, and so here we can say like 70 percentage. Like here, right? Whenever the average CPU usage percentage is greater than 70 percentage, at the time this the triggering it will happen. Okay, and I will just add the condition, and then I need to create the alert, the action group. The action group means so for example, I will create a new action group. I think it's generally whom it needs to be notified. Like I will just to say like active group name and notification. So here you can say, right, the Azure Resource Manager role, or you can send a email or SMS or push or voice notification. Okay, so here maybe I would say like email, and so for example, whenever the particular event is triggered, I it needs to notify to my email ID. Okay, so and then so I will just said okay, but here, right, you can select the SMS also, like you can provide your phone number or something, and then the app push notification or voice email or something, you can set it up, Mebrat. Okay, so here you are just saying like how it needs to notify, whether through email, phone number, or push notification or voice. So, Mebrat, you are clear, right? Okay. So the next one is like actions. So
Yeah,
for
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So
Thank you.
then yeah, the next one is like actions. So for example, whenever the particular event is happen, what action we need to take. Okay. So for example, the webhook, right? With this webhook, you can trigger the maybe the Azure DevOps pipeline or Jenkins job. You can do that. Okay, and then the automation runbook means you can create any other the Azure resources also. Automation runbook means it will have the runbook. So when you are clicking on the runbook, so you can select the runbook here. So whenever the particular event is happened, then the particular runbook will be running. So maybe it will add the new resource or something it will do. Okay, maybe so this is something optional only, so maybe the action group it is needed. um, so for example, it requires some 12 characters, display name to up to. Okay, and then the notification, I'm just selecting email, and so some t at gmail.com, and then some name I'm providing and clicking on okay, and action. So this is optional. So if you want to do any kind of the ITSM means, right? So Mebrat, do you know the ITSM, the service now ticketing management tool something? So basically when the event is happen, it will automatically create the ticket in the service
I
now
know
tool.
service now, but
Yeah, the service now, the ticketing tool, right? The similar like the
yeah, I
G.
know service now.
Yeah, so it will
Mm-hmm.
create the incident in the service now, so that the it will be directly assigned to the support team, so that it will be easy for the tracking everything.
The ITSM,
Uh, hello. Yeah, yes,
the
ma'am.
ITSM is
Yeah,
just service now.
yeah. The service now. So similar kind of the service now, or maybe we can create the ticket
Oh,
there.
okay.
Okay, but currently this is
Mm-hmm.
optional. Maybe if you want to do any kind of action similar, like for example, some kind of the high priority one, right? You can maybe notify it, and after that you can create the service now ticket also if you want. Okay, and then the
Right.
tags, those things and all optional, and then after that, yeah, you can create the action group, and then it will be select here, and for example here the action group is created, and here alert group name, something like rule you can specify, maybe some yeah, maybe alert, I'm just, it's a name only. And then here maybe you can specify like so for example, if the CPU is more than 70 percentage, right? So this is something like a warning kind of thing, so that if it is continuous and 30 percentage means definitely our application will slow down. So it is the warning or critical or something, some kind of severity you can select it. Okay. And then enable alert rule upon creation, or maybe otherwise, yeah, maybe otherwise, right? So it will be disabled. So if you are enabling it,
Right.
so from there onwards, it will search for the particular condition and then it will trigger the particular alerts. Okay. And then I'm just clicking on the creating the alerts. So this is how
If you do like the automatic resolution, if you see that the
yeah, the
automatic
automatic
resolve
resolution, right?
the
So
alert, mm, do you have to specify something like
yeah,
if
so
you
for
enable that?
yeah, yeah. So for example, right, after some point of 70 percentage usage spike, okay, but maybe in the next 15 minutes, it is again coming into below 70 percentage. Okay. So in those scenario, it will resolve the maybe the particular alert automatically. So for example, currently for the next 5 minutes, it is above 70 percentage, but then again it is coming below 70 percentage. Okay. So if you are enabling it, so it will maybe automatically resolve the ticket, or maybe the email and all, right? It will send like, yeah, now it is healthy or something, it will send. So that is what the automatically
Oh, okay.
resolving something. Okay.
Mhm.
So
So
now,
what if, let's say your setting is like for disk usage?
yeah,
So in that case, you know that the fixation, the resolution might not be automatic. Like, you know, if it's increased, then you need to add a space. At that
yeah,
time, you know, it's not fixing, but then you, so the automatic
it won't.
resolve
Yeah,
will not be
yeah.
effective here then,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. That also
Okay.
correct, Mibrat. But in some scenario, right? So, for example, you are a developer. Okay, so currently you are pulling the files from some places, and after processing it, and then through the code, you will be deleting the file, so that now the disk will be empty, right? So in those scenario, so it will be automatically there is some chances for resolution. So how the disk usage is spiked, because you are maybe down, you are creating some temporary file. Okay, for example, doing, you are doing some bulk processing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and then
Right. You add space or, you know, something,
yeah,
then
yeah,
that would be not automatic, but you have to be involved, right, on the
yeah,
resolution.
yeah,
But the setup, the automatic alert, I mean, resolution is only for the system itself. It's the
yeah,
process, right?
yeah. Because right,
Or maybe like the traffic is down now, then in
yeah,
CPU is decreased, for example, that okay.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yes, ma'am.
or do we have to like set some script there, like if it is this is the issue, then fix that or run this kind of or
Yeah,
clean up or something,
yeah, yeah. We can
or
do.
that's different.
Yeah, we can do that, Mibrat. So for example, here, right, in the actions, so maybe here you can specify. So in the actions, right, uh, so here you can say like you can run the run book or something, which means like the run book can be like
Okay.
Python script, PowerShell script. So those custom logic,
Mhm.
whatever you are thinking, you need to run it, right, for the fixing the particular one. So you can run by
Mhm.
choosing the run book. So the run book means here you, it will provide the option to run the Python script, the PowerShell script. You can run it here. So maybe the creating
Mhm.
the resource or deleting the resource. All maybe the maybe in some cases they are restarting the server. So everything you can done here. You can do using the run book.
Okay.
Like basically, right? It will allow you to provide the Python and PowerShell script, so that whatever the custom
Right.
logic we have to write it.
Okay.
Okay. And then yeah, so and then the next one, the maybe here, right? So now we have seen the managing alerts, so how we have to configure the alerts, but this is the common for all the things, member. It's not only for the AKS, it is common for everything. Okay. And then the end user satisfaction. Okay. So for example, right, we have deployed our application, but when they are accessing, right, so then only like the UI, the responsiveness, and then everything. So based on the Google Analytics, right, maybe there are many tools are there, like understanding how they are satisfied when they are using the particular portal or page. So those things and all, there are some tools. So from there, right, so for example, I am in the Azure portal for I am in the Azure portal for the more than 5 minutes. Okay, maybe in another page I am spending only 2 minutes. So those kind of analytics we can find using some other tools. So that's what the end user satisfaction. Okay. And then the Azure analyze user feedback, maybe even in many of the applications also, right? So they will be accessing the feedback, and even the Microsoft also, they will ask you, maybe if there is any problem, they will send the feedback and then the error log something. So those and all, it will help them to maybe troubleshoot the particular error. And then if we are also providing some feedback, right, so this is how we can improve it. So the feedback and all, they have to analyze and capture it. So this is the one thing. And then the automate application analytics. Okay, so for example, the application insights and the telemetry, right? So for example, this page is taking more time, and the particular maybe the DB call is taking long, maybe the delayed response, and then something like so these many failed requests happening for the particular API method. So those things and all, we can capture it using the application, the telemetry something. So maybe the yesterday we have seen the application insights, right? So for the Azure app services, so there we can say the response time and then the number of failed requests. So those things and all, we have to automate it, and then we have to manage the alerts also. Okay. And then as part of the feedback, right, and for example, so this is at the maybe the technical level, and then the maybe the DevOps and then something. And then here this is at the planning level. So for example, like if you are in the agile team, so they after end of every sprint, so they will be having the retrospective meeting. So at the time, for example, whatever the things went wrong, and whatever the things it went bad or good, so those things and all will be discussed there. And then maybe the scrum master will decide maybe in the upcoming sprint, so these are all the actions we can take, so that we can reduce the maybe we can increase the throughput, and then we can release the more functionalities to the end users. So those things and all, we will be discussing in the retrospective meeting. Okay. So it's why they are mentioning like the blameless means like, so it is not mean like no, the DevOps team is, they are not available all the time, so that is why we are not able to achieve the last sprint goal. And then the testing team, they will complain like the developer team, they will be always giving the source code at the end of the evening, so that even the testing team also, they won't be able to test after the evening and all, right? So those kind of the points and all, it will be discussed there, and then the scrum master will decide so what we can do best in the next sprint, so to overcome all those issues and all. So this is what this retrospective also, right? So this is also kind of maybe getting the feedback from the development team to improve the maybe the so to improve the capacity of our team to increase the more user the futures to the end users. So this is what the feedback. And then the mostly, right, so we have seen the alerts and then monitoring, right? So we have seen like uh, the last time we have sent the alert to the maybe the SMS and then email or something. Okay. And also, right, maybe the more the currently the more the the Microsoft Teams, it is the collaboration tool for all the organization, they are currently they are following it, so that instead of sending a mail or the maybe the sending in the SMS, maybe it would be good to maybe send in the particular Microsoft Teams channel. Okay, so that one also we can do. So Mebrat, so did you work with MS Teams? So did you get a chance to do that? I I think most of the teams they are moving to Microsoft Teams from Skype.
Yeah. I'm working. We have MS Teams. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, yes, my brother. So mostly, right? So for example, whatever the notification, right? So for example, you are closing the one story, okay, or otherwise someone they raise the pull request, and then the build is completed. And for example, the deployment is completed in the SIT environment, UAT environment. So all the kind of notification, right? We can be send it to the Teams channel. Okay, so for example, if you are sending everything in the maybe email, right? So your inbox would be flooded away, so that you even you cannot see what is the important, and maybe you will be missing some important communication also. Okay, so that is why maybe from the Microsoft side, so they are asking us to use the maybe the Microsoft Teams. So that is the Microsoft product, and otherwise you can use the Slack also. So that also similar like Microsoft Teams. So did you aware of the Slack, Mebrod?
Just I heard that, but yeah, I never.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't.
yeah.
I
So,
don't work with.
yeah. So that also similar like Teams only, my brother. Okay, like you can create the channels, you can create the groups. Okay, and inside that you can pin the Azure DevOps board or Azure pipelines, so that even you don't need to go to the Azure boards. You can right away in the Teams you can see all the status, everything, and every day, right? You can see like who has done the which job, and what are all the user stories are currently it is pending, and to whom it is assigned. So those kind of metrics and all it can be pushed as message to the teams actually, so that it will be easy to understand, right? So before doing the scrum call or something, maybe those details and all can be pushed to the teams, and then those and all it will be very easy to understood. Okay, so that is what the DevOps and then the teams integration. So mostly, maybe so maybe currently I don't have the teams integration. Maybe so. Are you using the Microsoft Azure DevOps and then Teams? Azure DevOps you have the access, right, from your organization.
Azure DevOps, yes, but we didn't start anything yet. It's like we are so the developers they are working on it.
Okay.
Then as a DBA we're gonna involve on CI/CD is
Okay.
still we are trying to adopt CI/CD in our environment. But that's new, and now they are DevOps is developer are working with other external team to
Okay.
get some idea, and then from there they will transfer some knowledge. But the expectation is we need to know the CI/CD DevOps so that as a production DBA we need to collaborate with developers and other teams so that we can deploy any deployment on production.
Okay.
That's because the developers they don't have access on production. That's the plan.
Okay.
But so far, still it's on analysis step
Okay.
from our team.
Okay.
So they just choose me. That's why I don't have any idea, and then try to
But
get
Mebret,
some.
so currently, right, you can create the pipeline, everything. So maybe even if it is going wrong, that's fine, right, at the initial time. So you can just do
Yeah,
play around with that tool, Mebret. So maybe at the I think
yeah,
currently you will be having some idea. But even if, but only one thing is, if
yeah,
there is something existing, don't delete this one, don't update this one, anything. But you can create a new
right,
pipeline, and then you can just do play around with that. Even if there is some issue, you can just delete your pipeline. So I think nothing going
right.
harm to other people's and all, right? So you can just
Yeah, yeah.
try that one, maybe it's not a problem. And even if you have
Yeah,
any
the only
queries,
difference is
yeah,
like, yeah, uh, they are using the Redgate
Okay.
automation tool.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I think for this one, maybe you have to know about like the how the Git repository, the structure they are doing it. So I think are there any code they have pushed already or not? Maybe the pipeline or the SQL schema and all they have it in the Git
Yeah, they are
repository.
doing the SQL schema, yeah. So
Oh,
as a baseline, they will just he tried to show like as a baseline using one server, one database
okay,
from server, and then creating baseline from there. We are trying to, compare with other environments, and he's trying to create another release like based on a change, and then it's as a test process, like trying to provide demo.
okay.
But then we were not sure how to adopt into our environment, because
Oh,
we are looking at the reason our manager is looking the CI/CD is like
okay.
to have uniform and through our environment. For example, let's say there is one database on production server, and we need to have same configuration
Yeah.
for all the environment, right?
Okay.
So in that case, instead of going one by one and check the configuration of the server and try to uniform throughout the environment, if we have any tool, like to do so, that would be really helpful.
Okay.
So that was the plan,
Okay.
that's having
Yeah.
the CI/CD. But it seems like the CI/CD is like for release that will work, but not it doesn't it seems like it's not fitting to our project.
Okay.
So
Okay,
I don't
Mebrat.
know how they're gonna move forward, but that's
Okay. So anyway, Mebrat, so you are saying like the unique the configuration it should be in the all the database, which means like
Exactly.
maybe
Yeah.
the configuration means right the table, the stored procedure, function. So that is fine with that. Okay, so that you can maintain the consistent across all the databases. But the thing is like
Right.
the configuration means like the database server properties, right? So that you are saying the it has to be consistent across all the environments or how it is?
Yeah, example like, okay, we have like DB Common, for example, one database,
Yeah.
which consists of stored procedure like custom SP and functions, for all those that it should deployed on other environment also.
Okay.
The server could be new or existing server, but it
Okay.
needs to be uniform, meaning
Yeah.
that for example, if you want to run SPB, which is like for blocking, it could be like, because we
Yeah.
have like custom store procedures. It's on one database, all kind of, scripts that we use, etc.
Okay.
So for that, just for DBA purpose, only
Okay.
for DBA use, we want to run that DB and having that database in all environments, whether it's new or existing uniformly.
Oh.
So for that, like we were thinking that is Azure DevOps might be a solution. So for example, if there is any change, if we want to update our custom SP, or we want to add another one, then we can add on one DB on one environment. Then using this CI/CD, we can implement as a release for deploy on accordingly on the other environment.
Okay.
So I think that was the plan
Mm.
with the manager.
Okay. So maybe and one more question,
Yeah.
like, so for example, the DB you are going to create is the new one or the existing DB, so which is having more data, like the rows?
Yeah, it's the existing one. But then, like all the time when there is an update, for example, like SP who has so many metrics included currently, right? Or SP active with active or SP who. Just as I'm giving you example. So we instead of going one by one and change that, we have that SP SP who we can deploy it as a release, meaning that we only update the current update or current upgrade, for example, then deploy as a release for all the other environments.
Oh, okay, my brother.
Just this is a kind of example.
Okay.
So that was the project we were assigned as a for DBA. And then once if this works, then we will adopt this CI/CD for all other deployments also,
Okay.
not only.
Okay.
It's just the DBA portal or the DB common, which is assigned only or designated for DBA team. If that will be working fine, and if it meets our, it's kind of we want to test in our end, instead of deploying or adopting the CI/CD to all kind of deployment in production.
Yeah, so Mibrod, so for example, right, the DDL or the stored procedure update, something you can do that as a deployment, okay? I don't think the insert script and all, we can't be added into the CACD. At the time, we have to run manually only, so that you can say to them. And apart from that, right, the DDL changes like the creating the new column, adding the constraint, removing the constraint, and all the part of the DDL related changes, and so that you can add it as the maybe in the CACD, yeah, that you can do that. But for the DML related operations and maybe that the transaction related thing, so that we cannot be integrate with the CACD. But maybe maybe for example, right, sometimes the app team, they will be having the configuration in the maybe the database table, okay? So at the time they only have to run the particular insert script or something, but that we cannot be integrate with our CACD pipeline. But anyway, it's possible only, Membrad. So you can just maybe analyze that thing. Maybe if there is any queries, you can let me know. Maybe I will suggest you some other things. But I thought like the Redgate will be maybe we can do for the Oracle, but maybe the SQL Server also it is supporting the Redgate tool. Okay. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, it's supporting also. Yeah. So yeah, you need to just install SSMS, Redgate with integrated with SSMS and Visual Studio. Then yes, you can add like a source and destination server on the Visual Studio, which is integrated with Redgate. Then yes, you can use that, and also Git is there.
Okay, yeah.
But another issue it will have currently, like I said, it's still in analysis step.
Okay.
Still, he didn't come up back with the DevOps team. Didn't come up with some solution For example, the another issue we have is like it's all or none, meaning that like there is so many DDL change, right? For example, there is DDL script 1, 2, 3, 4 as a deployment. You run that. Then if you are using CI/CD pipeline to deploy, it's either it deploy everything, then it succeed. But if it fails in process, then it will roll back everything.
Okay, the rollback also they have to support it. Yeah, otherwise,
Then
yeah,
then that's an issue also, another issue, meaning that, for example, in other scenario, let's say you have deployment, it consists like 15 script, right? Then you start script 1, 2, 3. Let's say script 20 scripts succeed, then 21 fail, right?
Yeah, correct.
And at that time, you have to go just fix 21, script 21, for example, and then you start from 21 onward and continue deployment. But with this CI/CD, it needs to be roll back everything and then fix it, and right. So that's also another
I
I
think
don't know if
I think Mebrad, you're surely right. So basically how it, for example, even the rollback also the Redgate will support. So for example, you are saying like the maybe you are having the 20 statement, the DDL statements, the first 10 is committed, the rest 10 is like failed due to some other reason or any syntax error. Okay, but for the rollback, right, so you will have the previous version of the statement, right? So you can just select the particular build and then you can run it. So what it will do is like it will just compare your source code version, the schema, and then it will compare with the target database, and whatever it is changes, so which is means like the only the 10 statement change, so that will actually delete it. I think mostly the Redgate will have the capability, Mebrat. So the rollback also, but that is somewhat
right.
yeah
Right,
maybe.
but I mean, it will roll back. But the issue is, like I said, let's say it takes like maybe, I don't know, some time to complete, right? To deploy like maybe 15 script, but then 51 fail. You have only like maybe 5 or 10 script to go. Instead of rollback, which one is the easiest one?
Okay.
Like fixing 51 and continue your deployment from 51 onward, or roll back everything, meaning roll back like 50 or 49 scripts and start over. Which one is the easiest?
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. And maybe it's for the scenario, right? One more thing. So for example, from the dev, so if the first 15 is working, right? So the same behavior only it will be there for the QA, production, everything. So that maybe it's not like maybe if it is the dev, right, you have to fix that error. Maybe in the UAT and production and all, at the one go, it will deploy all the changes. Yeah. Okay, Mebrat. So Mebrat, and this one, right? So integrating the DevOps with Azure DevOps, like there will be something like connectors. Maybe if you have the maybe the teams you already have, right? You can just search the connectors, and then here you can see like Azure DevOps connector. You can just click on add, and then so sometimes, right, the organization won't enable it for some security issue, but you can just check like whether the Azure DevOps is enabled or not, and then you can provide the DevOps account automatically. It will be added here. So if you are using the same DevOps account and then the Teams account, okay, and then you can just choose it here, and you can see the all the maybe the if anyone is updated the user story and then the task is updated, right? So you will get the notifications in your Teams channel. Okay, like update DB schema as a user I want to. So these are all the changes. If you are integrate the Azure DevOps using the connectors in Teams, you will get the maybe the all the notification here itself. Like maybe if you are a team lead, then you want to know what are all the things the developer is doing, then you can easily understood what is actually going maybe in the team something. Okay. Maybe this one, my brother, yeah, you can. I have posted the link, right? You can just try by yourself and then let me know if you have any queries. But mostly, right, we won't do that. Maybe from the DevOps, maybe in the real time setup, right? Maybe the DevOps person or someone they will do, or some of them, even some of the organizations, because it will have some cost also, like the connectors, right, for the every user or something they will charge it. And even the DevOps also they have to install the plugin, then only it will work. But you can just try it whether it is enabled in your organization or not. If it is enabled, yeah, maybe for maybe in your team's channel you can enable it.
Okay. So the Slack is also a communication tool?
Yeah. So the Slack also similar like the collaboration tool only. But before coming Teams, right, it was very popular like the Slack. Okay. But I think once the Microsoft is launched Teams, I think the Microsoft Teams, right, it is they have the idea coming from the Slack only. I think the Slack only initially it was there. And after that the Microsoft released the Teams with many features like the meeting everything. And after that everyone is moved towards the Microsoft Teams. But still many of them they will be using the Slack also. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but is it okay? It's also there. I mean, with debug, can you
Yeah,
show
the
us?
DevOps means like the integrating the tools, right? So, for example, you are
Yeah, yeah.
integrating the Azure DevOps with the team so that you will get the instant notification. So, for example, right,
Okay.
you have, yeah,
I'm saying, yeah.
yeah. So, for example, one scenario, okay. So, maybe in the DevOps, right, you can automate the deployment or you can schedule the deployment. Okay. So, for example, you have scheduled in your time night 12 o'clock, it has to be deployed to the production environment. Okay. At the time, you don't need to log into the maybe the system and the Azure DevOps portal and all. Okay. So, for example, during the schedule time, it will automatically start the deployment, and if there is any failure then it will notify you in the Teams channel so that you can see whether it is completed or failed. If something is failure, at the time only you can log into the system and then you can see what it is going wrong something. So because it is having some kind of flexibility to us, right? So that's why we are going, we are using the feedback tools. Like this is why we are integrating with the Teams channel or the Slack channel, so that maybe at the maybe middle of night, right? We cannot maybe log into the system. We don't want to do that. You can in your mobile, right? You will have the Slack and then the Teams install, and you will get the notification. Hey, the production deployment is successful, then we are good. If it is failed, then after that if it is record, then we can log into the system, we'll see what it is went wrong something. So this is why we are using the Teams and Slack, my brother. And other use cases like if someone is pushing the code, or then they are raising the pull request for the code review, in those scenario also maybe we will get the instant feedback, so that everybody in the team they will get to know. Because if it is posting something in the channel, right, so that it will be available for everyone, it's not only like you or the maybe the team lead, so that it will be notify everyone in the team, so that it will be easy to collaborate within the team actually, my brother.
All right.
Okay. Okay, my brother. Yeah, maybe I think we take another 30 minutes, right? Maybe it's a very late, very late to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, my brother. Yeah, good night. Yeah,
All
maybe we'll
right.
see tomorrow. Yeah,
Good
bye.
night. Thank you.